we spend a lot of time and focus on externally how we push that brand out into the internet. So, but I agree with you. The experience from a customer perspective, I mean, it's the bar just continues to go up and to be raised. And I think we all have to rise up to meet that challenge.
Welcome to RevOps Champions, a podcast designed for revenue professionals looking to advance sales and marketing initiatives through the role of RevOps within their organizations. In each episode, we feature leaders who are leveraging technology to drive operational efficiency, revenue, and improve the customer experience. Listen in and learn how to become a better RevOps leader within your own organization. Let's get started.
Mark, I'm so happy to have you here today. My guest today is Mark Hokanson, CTO of Bridgewater Bank. Bridgewater Bank is a St. Louis Park, Minnesota-based bank, which is part of another bigger banking firm. But I'm going to just stick to the banking piece for now. It's a Twin Cities bank dedicated to serving the diverse needs of commercial real estate investors, entrepreneurs, business clients, and successful individuals. By pairing a range of deposit lending, business services, and solutions with a responsive service model, Bridgewater has seen continuous growth and profitability, with total assets of $3.6 billion and 7 branches as of March this year. Bridgewater is considered one of the largest locally led banks in the state of Minnesota and has received numerous awards for its growth, banking services, and esteemed corporate culture, which I know we could probably do a whole episode around that, because this is part of how we were connected. And then I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a background about you. So Mark is currently the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer of Bridgewater Bank. He has 25 years experience working in various technology roles across both large and mid-sized organizations, from IBM to Thomson Reuters, Fair Isaac Corporation, otherwise known as FICO, Bremer Bank, and now Bridgewater Bank. Mark has a comprehensive background in large-scale platform delivery, enterprise business applications, technical architecture, analytical data solutions, agile software development, information security, risk frameworks, and infrastructure planning, with a focus on cloud adoption. And all that stuff that I just talked about is one of the reasons that I was so excited to have Mark on the show today. He's passionate about developing high-performing teams that align the technology roadmap with strategic business objectives, which is pretty much one of my ultimate passions as well, and which is why I do the work that I do. Mark has a bachelor's degree in management information systems and an MBA from the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. Mark, thanks again for being here with me today.
You bet, Brendon. Really excited to be here.
We've been clients of Bridgewater Bank now for over 10 years.
Yep.
And so we've, of course, followed very closely what Bridgewater has done. And part of our journey is we can thank both personally, my wife and I, as well as our business. We can thank Bridgewater a lot for that, because one of the things that you and I talked about recently, so in addition to when we became a HubSpot partner back in 2014, our EOS journey actually started at the same time through an invitation from Jerry and Mary Jane at Bridgewater Bank.
Yep.
So that in those last 8 years, our relationship has really become really solid. But I'm going to dive straight into our purpose of it, today, which is, this is the RevOps Champions podcast. And I believe that you are a walking example of a RevOps champion, which is anybody who is involved as a professional in any organization that is somehow contributing to growing the business better.
Right. Yep.
It's really those simple, if we put it into 2 words, our goal is to help businesses grow better. But to get back to sort of the day-to-day, what is the role of technology, and more specifically, the technology component of revenue operations in an organization or your organization?
Yeah. So thanks, Brendon. Great intro. For us and Bridgewater, I mean, our purpose is really to be the finest entrepreneurial bank in the Twin Cities. So, I've been here just over, coming up on 3 years. And as I've, learned more and more about the bank and the way that our different departments operate, I feel like my role is really to try to bridge the gap across our different departments and using different technologies that align the focus of the business, both from a CRM perspective and from a data and analytics perspective, but also just simply from a workflow perspective. So I've really spent a lot of time, trying to introduce new technologies that will make, our employees' jobs easier, move them from, manual processes and manual workflow to a more centralized approach and using technology to do that. So we've made significant investments over the last couple of years, and ultimately we're really trying to streamline, the interaction across the bank and ultimately to serve, to the benefit of the customer. So that's sort of how we think about RevOps and sort of how I've approached it and really just trying to drive sort of a 360-degree view of how we think about our clients.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the conversations that you and I had recently when we met was, who in an organization can be responsible for either and or the employee experience and the customer experience.
Yep.
And I believe a lot of businesses are grappling with this right now, but I would say that, a CTO is often not the first person one thinks of
No.
when you think, but we might get into this a little bit later, but like I shared with you, we think of it as two sides of the same coin, that internal operating efficiency, whether it's the customer facing teams or the entire team, operational efficiency is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the customer experience.
Right.
And the question is, what does the coin represent? In other words, and what we've realized over the last 3 or 4 years, of doing technology implementations in businesses, primarily what we started off doing was to solve for the operational, efficiency piece.
Right.
But what we realized when we were done 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later is that the customer experience, went through the roof.
That's
So
right.
it was kind of an added bonus. Anyway, but we might come back to that again, but
And
unless you have some
yeah,
comments
and
there.
I would add, I think, technology organizations are in a unique position because they are cross-functional across the business. They have a window into each department. They gain an understanding as they work with each department as to what their technology needs are. And they have kind of a unique lens in that they can see what each functional department's trying to do. And they really work as a centralized point to bring them together. And
Right.
I agree with you. I think that ultimately, as you start bringing those groups together, that has, a positive experience on and how that reflects back on the clients. And, it's funny because I've been in technology 25 years and, in the last few years, it's I've seen more and more IT staff interfacing with clients that, 5 or 10 years ago you would have never seen. And so I think my goal is really to push my team as close to the customer as I can, ensure we've got things that we need to work on in the back office of the bank. But I
Hmm.
really do think, our customers are expecting, every organization to be more IT savvy than they've ever been. And I think, the group of individuals, we've got a talented group of IT staff that, the closer we get them to the clients, the more effective that we'll be as an organization and the more value that we'll bring to our clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could not have said that better. So, Mark, what does RevOps mean to you, or from your perspective? Because I know it's still, part of the goal of this podcast is to educate folks on what RevOps actually is as a model. But I'd like to, get your perspective on what it means to you.
I look at it as how do we get the organization to really collaborate with the customer in mind and with everything that we do. And so that's, everything from increasing, our productivity and accountability across the organization as we think about our clients and think about their needs. How do we create a more predictable experience for that customer? How do we track our activities and our interactions with that client? So, we've been rolling out a CRM platform and really trying to focus that every interaction that we have with our clients, we want to make sure that everyone across the organization knows, what that channel was, how we communicated, what the last conversation was. And that way it creates more intimacy with our clients in that they feel that we know them and that it doesn't matter who they talk to, they're going to experience what we would call, an ultimate experience for our clients and, just a great experience to interface with Bridgewater.
Great. Yeah, which of course is essentially, maybe slightly different words to say the same thing that I would say. And this is part of going back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, which is, I think for those of us who have been around for maybe too long, who are maybe not digital natives, we don't make the connection between technology and taking care of customers.
Right.
And whereas the reality is today that, you cannot take care of your clients or customers unless you have, fully integrated technology. And of course, you've aligned everything else that you're using the technology to make, better, cheaper, or
Yeah.
faster.
And the clients are more technically savvy than they've ever been. I mean, the adoption, across every business and every small business. I mean, these customers are coming to us and they're asking really smart questions, and they want to see that the bank that they're with is continuing to evolve and keep pace with the market. And we're a growing bank, and we're always looking at how do we stay relevant with the industry trends, and how do we differentiate ourselves among the banking space, and especially with the larger banks that we compete with every day.
Right. Yeah, because, they're every one of our clients or customers is, living in the same world that we do, where from the time you wake up in the morning, again, depending on how many screens you have around you throughout the day, and then until you go to bed, we're all visiting multiple websites every day of different businesses
Right.
typically. And those businesses are setting the bar for what a website should look like and what a customer experience should look like.
Right.
So our challenge as businesses, especially in the B2B space, is how do we recreate that experience on our websites to start off with?
Yep.
And then how do you continue that relationship once it leaves the website and gets into, email and someone walking into, in your case, branch, or in our case, an office,
Yep.
and starting to interact with people? How do you create that continuity?
And it's funny. I mean, customers, they go to your website. That's the first impression they get of who you are as an organization. And I think, there's a lot of companies out there that don't pay enough attention to that. And I think we really try to make sure that our website obviously brands our bank and reflects our core values. And we spend a lot of time and focus on externally how we push that brand out into the internet. So, but I agree with you. The experience, from a customer perspective, I mean, the bar just continues to go up and to be raised, and I think we all have to rise up to meet that challenge.
Right. And of course, we're just because we're in the space that we're in, but really everybody's coming along for the ride, and which is the reason that we exist as a company at Dynamico, is technology will continue to change. The world will continue to change. Buyer behavior will continue to change because of changes in technology.
Right.
So the only option you really have as a business or any kind of organization, we have some pretty large nonprofit organizations who have to do the same thing. You
Yep.
know, their website and their anything that's customer facing has to, get the attention of whoever it is they're trying to get the attention of.
Yeah, and that's an incredible challenge for those smaller organizations to keep up, especially given the talent market that we have especially in the Twin Cities, but across the country right now for the technology labor that's out there. So,
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because what we've seen also, this is probably potentially one of the best retention tools you can create is, anyone who has the tools that they need to do their work well and with as little friction as possible, surely has to be a good thing as far as retention is concerned.
yep.
Because again, people talk to each other on the weekends, who don't work in the same place, and they air their frustrations. How was your week, kind of thing. It's like, oh well, we've our CRM is really terrible, or I've got to manually upload these reports
Right.
for my boss or whatever. It's like, oh, I just press a button and all the stuff is done for me. It's all set up in advance. It's automated. It takes 5 minutes. And in some cases, I don't have to do anything because it's all done for me. Who suddenly, the one person saying, oh, well, can I, apply to work at your company, kind of
Yeah,
thing? That's
I think people want to see value in the work they do. And if they're doing a job that, is antiquated in its process or in the workflow that they're using, they feel that pain every day, and it's just going to take time before they're not going to want to come to work anymore. So I'm glad you mentioned that because, as we've been rolling out some of the workflow automation tools at Bridgewater, that's been one of the biggest compliments that we've gotten. a lot of times from the back office groups that go maybe underappreciated because they're working behind the scenes, and a lot of times they don't get the same investment that the front line and the sales side get. So,
Right.
we're constantly evaluating how do we allow our employees to work smarter versus harder, and how do we use technology to make that happen?
Yeah, totally. We use that phrase a lot around here too.
Yeah.
So, Mark, moving on to the next piece here. So, how does the RevOps function support in your particular case? Whether what it customers, client services, client success, marketing, sales. How do they work together
So I
at
mean,
Bridgewater Bank?
I think as we mentioned, I mean we're an EOS client just like you, and so we're very aligned using the traction process across our organization. Before coming to Bridgewater, I this is traction was new to me, and I hadn't seen it in action, and it's been quite an amazing journey for myself. So we align our core values and our core focus across the bank. So we've got values around being unconventional, responsive, dedicated, growth, and accuracy. And I mentioned our purpose to be the finest entrepreneurial bank in the Twin Cities. We share that with all of our employees, and we all align across the organization towards our target to be, a $10 billion bank by 2030. And that then connects our marketing strategy as we build out kind of our 1 year plan and our 3 year plan. And so every department in the bank, sees this strategy, shares in this vision, and we all align towards this, sort of a common true north. And having not seen that in action prior to coming to Bridgewater, it's been quite an incredible thing to get an entire organization pointed in the right direction, following a strategy that everyone buys into. So we look at that, and then we also, as we think about how we go to market, we have a proven process. So we follow that, and we seek to onboard our clients and build that network with them. And so we follow a very common principle across, as we move into our sales channels.
Yeah, that's great. And then you also shared with me, I mean, you have this proven process, but of discover, onboard, execute, support, and network, which again I know is again part of the EOS process as well. You have a proven process, which we've also found very powerful. But it's interesting this parallel path that we've also seen using EOS. Yeah, I mean, I believe every business has an operating system, whether they know it or not.
Right.
And if they don't, they really should. And one of the things that just makes it so much easier is that you have a common language and understanding for alignment and accountability. But as you and I have been chatting, you there's this clear parallel between EOS and Traction and RevOps, because they're both models to which again you're making life easier either for your employees or your customers or clients. And you can share a lot between the two and sort of check them against each other.
Right.
So I'm gonna move on to the next piece, because I think we might come back to some of the accountability and alignment type stuff. And if we don't, we'll get you back for a deeper dive at another
Okay.
point.
Sounds good.
So, Mark, the one thing we also always want to make sure we talk about, because everybody listening knows that there is no such thing as in business as a straight line from point A to point B. We all have to. I mean, our jobs really as leaders is to deal with issues and
Yep.
and challenges, which is why we have models like EOS to help us do that more effectively. But the reality is that we all have challenges along the way. Can you share a business challenge that you've experienced in the last few years that was somehow solved by, the topic here today, some component or multiple components of RevOps?
Yeah, definitely. So, I joined Bridgewater back in the fall of 2019, just before the pandemic. And I spent sort of the first 6 months really getting a lay of the land as far as, where was the bank going with our strategy? How did that strategy align with our technology roadmap? And, we had a lot of good conversations around how we think about mobility, how we think about interacting digitally, and introducing some of the workflow solutions sort of pre-pandemic, getting some pushback in terms of we've sort of always done things a certain way. As we entered into COVID, it became apparent to all of us that we needed to quickly adopt a technology roadmap that would help move our workforce remote and get the tools into their hands to continue to do their work. So we aggressively, launched our roadmap for technology, which included just, introducing the Microsoft platform for Office 365, Teams, all the digital components. We've, pushed people home with laptops and VPN connectivity and started to understand how to work through the digital medium. At the same time, the Paycheck Protection Act or program came out through the CARES Act, and we were challenged by our business in terms of understanding how we can serve our customers. And so we, as a bank, we probably did on average about 1,000 loans a year. As the PPP program ramped up, we were being asked to roll out, north of 1,000 loans in about 12 weeks. And as we looked at our current workflows and processes, most of it was manual, most of it was emails between different groups, and never really had to work at that kind of pace under that kind of pressure. So we worked with a partner to bring in some workflow tools to really align the business on how do we help our customer? How do we accelerate these PPP loans through a solution that we could use to align, marketing, finance, sales, technology, deposit, credit departments
Mhm.
into a common direction. And so we launched an application that allowed us to, intake those customer requests through our website, insert them into a workflow platform that could be seen and used across all the different departments. That actually gave us the ability to track, every loan that was moving through that workflow at any point in time. And, prior to that, everything was being done through Excel spreadsheets and sort of siloed areas of the business that were all looking at sort of different results. But we were able to then build dashboards across the entire pipeline of all of our loans and then use that to make decisions and to take actions and most importantly really to communicate to our customers who were at the time really desperate for that relief as to
Mhm.
where their loan was in the pipeline, when they could expect, to get those funds and to help work with their employees on the retention.
Yeah. So to recap, so you did more than you would typically have done in the past in a year. You did more than that in 3 months.
We did more than that in 3 months, and certainly what we had at the time would have never scaled to accomplish that. And
Right.
so by developing a specific application to sort of serve that PPP application need for our clients, we were able to rapidly scale and obviously serve them as best we could. And that really took, getting all the groups aligned. There was a certain amount of urgency as far as, helping our customers. So we had, marketing and lending and technology, on calls late into the night, talking through like what do we need to do and how do we work together, with the common goal of getting these loans through. And, so marketing would build, updates to our website for online submissions, and lending was trying to communicate with the clients on where that loan was in the process. And obviously
Mhm.
technology was trying to move across all these departments and very agilely adopt new capabilities into the app so that they could deliver and meet that need.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I didn't know this was all happening, and of course, we banked with Bridgewater. So when it was our turn to get the PPP loan, it was like, okay, well, we're just going to do it with Bridgewater
Yeah.
because that's our bank. But I meet with a lot of business owner groups and CEO groups, and every month, and one of of course, the hottest topic for at least the first 6 months of the pandemic was what's happening with the PPP loans. And I was like, well, ours is fine. We're,
Yeah.
yeah, we're done. And everyone else was like, how did you, who are you banking with? And, and then talking about all the issues that they were having. Again, sort of paraphrasing that potentially some of the banks that they were probably, approaching their typical or traditional banks. And those banks just weren't set up to handle the demand that was suddenly coming their
Yeah,
way.
and
Right.
we saw a lot of, I think we had 40% of our loans came from new customers and new relationships that based on our responsiveness, was enough for them to understand, they banked at a larger bank, and when they picked the phone up to call them when they really needed to, they didn't get an answer. And so Bridgewater was there and we were able to to answer the phone and help them and get them through that process. And a lot of those have now become, we hope, lifelong customers.
Yeah. I mean, and which again is another one of the benefits that you don't think about when you're investing in sort of an integrated technology stack, primarily focused on internal operating efficiency. Most businesses doing that don't suddenly think of the value of marketing because the example you just gave, I mean, what better referral marketing could you have than people saying, "Oh, well, you should come to our bank because they've figured this out."
That's right.
And to your point, you had 40% new, people, businesses who were not customers who are now customers, which that didn't cost you anything in marketing, and that probably took care of a big chunk, if not your entire tech investment budget for that year.
Yeah, and it feeds into our core value of being responsive to our clients. So I think that's really
Yeah,
what we really want to see is we want customers in the local Twin Cities market to understand that when they, they can bank at a bigger bank, but if they want to bank with someone who's responsive and that, we'll listen to them and answer the phone when they call, we're here for them, and that's our growth strategy.
yeah. Which is, I mean, this might just be a side note, but I think, at least in my experience of 10 years of living here now, both in Minnesota and the U.S., the and because in the 5 countries where I lived before coming here and countries that I visited, you don't see as many, smaller regional local banks as you do in the US.
Right.
But which is kind of neither here nor there. But what I've seen in the US is that one of the reasons I keep hearing over and over that people continue to work with big banks is because they think that they probably have better technology than smaller banks.
Right.
But if you can offer what only a smaller bank can offer, you also have
The
best in
relationship.
class
Yep.
and best in class technology that'll be able to support that customer experience.
Yeah, the customer gets the best of both worlds, I think. And for me, that's, given my background and I worked in lots of large scale technology organizations, that's really the value I think I can bring to the bank and in bringing some of these technologies because I don't think the barrier to entry now for companies of any size to get access to, whether it's the latest SaaS technology or the latest, analytics or data warehouse technology, the barrier is much lower than it was, 5 or 10 years ago when we
Yeah.
used to buy packaged software. So by bringing that into the bank and allowing them easy access to some of these tools, we can compete, with banks of any size.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So, Mark, on the flip side of, so you just gave us an example of a challenge that you overcame, but not only overcame, it became almost like one of the, best things potentially that could have happened to any business at that time.
Yeah.
It was a real success. But can you talk a little bit more about, so one of the most common challenges in businesses who haven't yet figured this out is the misalignment component. And it's not just the misalignment of their technology, where they have, let's say, 37 different pieces of software that they've acquired over time or that they've subscribed to over time that are not, integrated. And you just talked about this a minute ago where you have these siloed situations of technology where data is flowing into more than one place, and that should not be the case. So that's on the technology side, but it also happens on the data side because obviously most of the flow is actually data.
Right.
And then of course the other areas of misalignment are process. So the processes between teams inside a company. And then of course the misalignment of people. Do you have any other sort of high level challenges that you see when those four things, people, process, data, and technology, are misaligned?
Well, I think, to the data point, we've seen that especially in this last year or so as we've accelerated our roadmap, the demand for data and accurate data across the organization is just growing like wildfire. And we've really, prior to aligning that, you had multiple groups working off reports with different information, with different sources of truth. And that's a real challenge when you walk into a meeting and three people are looking at a report that they think says the same thing, but have different results. We've worked very diligently to bring all that data into a central warehouse that gives us the ability to build dashboards, common dashboards across each department so that we can align not only the data and the way it's represented, but also the vocabulary that each department uses as they're talking about, whatever challenge or whatever element of data that they're staring at.
Hmm.
And that then means that you need to educate the business because what one department thinks, a lead an opportunity is maybe a little bit different than the other department. So
Hmm.
we've really worked hard to get our data aligned, get our dashboards across our departments, cross-functional, and making sure that we're all looking at the same thing as we try to make decisions and talk about the client. That's probably the most misalignment that I've seen. And then as you go down a layer, you know, bad data in is bad data out. So then if you think upstream from a process perspective, really as you start using data visualization tools, it starts, generating the questions as to, well, this report looks wrong or this element looks wrong. And so then you're moving upstream and you're trying to understand, is that process different? Is the way that data is being fed into the system different? Or, do we have a people problem or a training problem or QA problem? So, I
Hmm.
think using the data visualization has been a good sounding board for us to start seeing where we've got maybe fissures in the people and process issues that are upstream feeding that.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that you see too often, even though again we all know that you cannot manage what you cannot measure, because so coming back to the
Right.
data component, but it's one of the sort of the easiest things that that we typically fix for clients when we go in and sort of do an assessment of like what their current situation is as far as where they have good alignment and where their alignment is potentially not as good as it should be, is in that the data area. It's just they're measuring things that they thought were the right things that they should be measuring, but they don't really tie up to their business objectives at the highest level. So that it's just part of cleaning that up as well.
Well,
You
and
know.
you need good data governance for that. So that was the other thing that we did is we built a data governance team to help us not only define some of the vocabulary, but also look at, how are we prioritizing the work that we're doing and how is this data going to be used and making sure that we are aligned across the leadership team as far as, what data is going where and how is it going to be used. And then over time, we'll start thinking about how we begin the life cycle of that. So governance is another important area that I think is,
Mhm.
because you can run into scenarios where different departments go off in different directions and they're all, creating their own dashboards or creating their own reports. And so I think you need good data governance to keep that in check.
Yeah, and of course, and then dig into those situations as to, well, why there might be something else behind why they're doing that,
Right.
which might be more of a process issue.
Definitely. I
You
mean,
know, it must,
people are always trying to solve their own problems in their own space. And so I
right.
think the more we can bring those issues out to the broader business and talk about them, you know, I think we tend to find common solutions, across departments, and then each department can benefit from that.
Yeah, yeah. Which is part of the again the change management benefit of doing something like EOS.
Right.
You want to know what the issues are so that you can figure out a solution for them.
Yeah, and tap into departments that have already solved that problem.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I love that. So, Mark, in the customer centric world that we live in, how does business technology impact or help in improving customer experience? So this is kind of another higher level. We've touched on a lot of this already, but just at a higher level, how do you talk about business technology impacting or helping improve the customer or client experience?
As I mentioned before, I think the easier I can make our internal employees' jobs, I think the happier they're going to be. I think that's going to transcend into how they interact with our clients.
Hmm.
We have some large projects going on, around CRM to sort of streamline, especially our loan origination workflow and our pipeline process for our business development clients. And then there's simple things like we put in a new voice telephony system last year, and my CEO is very keen on making sure that when the phone rings, we want 80% of those calls to be answered by a person. And
Hmm.
so we put a lot of time and effort into just simple things like that, where our clients get a more personalized experience when they interact with us. As we look out, I think into the future, it will be moving, I think, more digital interaction. So how do we create more self-service for our clients? How do we allow them, if they don't want to make that phone call, can they interface with our website? Can they interface with their banking products and solutions? And I
Mm.
think really there's the generation that's probably coming behind our generation that's really that's how they've grown up, and that they've
Yep.
interfaced digitally with almost everything they do. And so I think we look out into the future and we think about, for those clients that just want that digital experience, how are we going to meet that demand, and watching products and solutions that we think will hit the mark for them.
Right. And it's weird because it's almost like you have to do it in such a way that it almost seems like it's just normal, right? Because that,
Right.
to your point of these, the generation behind us, that what we refer to them, pretty much anyone who grew up with technology as digital natives,
Yep.
the they don't even think about it. It's just what they know. So it's what they expect.
Right.
And it's not like, oh, I expect this. It's just an inherent expectation that there should be technology that allows me to do things without speaking to a human being up until a certain point,
Yep.
right? And we just have to make sure as businesses that we're building solutions that push the technology as far as it can go with that digital experience,
Yeah.
and then there's a very easy handoff to the human experience when it happens, and that there's consistency
Yeah.
in
So
that
you
message.
want to really capture that customer through the channel that they're most comfortable with, and then maintain that relationship. And eventually they'll pick the phone up, but it's, my 14-year-old does everything on his iPad, and he teaches me things all the time. So
Yeah, yeah, we hear that all the time too. We can definitely learn a lot from our kids. So I have one final question for you, and then if there's anything else that you wanted to chat about, we can do that too. But as a CTO, what are you most excited about in the next year?
I think there's a couple of things. I think the SaaS marketplace that's just really blown up in the last, 5 or 10 years. We're seeing, as a CTO, I see lots of new products and services, and my inbox is full of vendors asking me if for a meeting. But
Mhm.
there's really just an amazing marketplace of tools that are evolving in that software as a service space. And I think that's really offering any organization of any size to find the right product to fit their needs. And they don't always have to buy the best of breed or go in the upper right hand quadrant of Gartner. They can find, products and services that are purpose built to serve, the size of their organization. We're also seeing with a lot of these smaller companies that are evolving, there's a lot of focus on the customer experience, but also really the customer success. So I think the newer companies are coming up. They're really keen on understanding how they maintain the relationship with you as a tech provider. And so they've
Mhm.
got customer revenue officers, they've got customer success managers. They understand that once they have that relationship, they need to foster that relationship and maintain and grow it. And
Mhm.
so that we see, a much better partnership with some of the newer companies as they're growing, in that they really value, the ability to work with us and to introduce their products into the marketplace. And so I think that's a great thing for sort of small to mid-sized companies, is what they should know is that there are lots of partners out there. There's a fantastic network, and you can find really good solutions at the price points that meet your needs. And
Mhm.
and I just think that that's going to continue to evolve and accelerate over time.
Yeah, I have to ask you this question because one of the things that actually we are challenged with frequently as a technology implementation and integration partner is these SaaS companies are they probably have as far as industries go, they have amongst the best sales and marketing
That's right.
people and things and systems in the world. So what we run into a lot, and often when we get called in, it's typically once a company has already pulled the trigger on a CRM or I'm saying that, or a marketing automation platform that they want to integrate with a CRM or both, and it goes on and on and on. But they've bought the technology without actually doing any of the assessment work
Yep.
up front as far as like what it is that they're trying to do and improve
That's right.
by implementing the technology. And because the technology companies or the software companies are so their marketing and sales are so good that you almost, as a customer who buys directly from them, you almost feel like you're just going to plug this thing in and suddenly
Yeah.
everything's gonna work.
And they don't talk to the technology group, right? They talk to the business and they get the deal done.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very common problem that we see too. And in my experience is, the business, especially in organizations where, your technology departments, being pulled in multiple different directions, we see a lot of, cases where business might buy, a Salesforce or a Workday, and they'll think that they can just plug it in because that's what the sales and marketing team told them. And usually those obviously lead to sort of failed implementations, and then we're bringing in additional consultants to come in. And usually what ends up happening is we go back to really what the foundational issues were on the business process side, because until you've mapped that business process out and established what problem you're really trying to solve, you can't really successfully implement any solution or any new technology without sort of an idea of what that finish line looks like. And I think many companies struggle with, failed implementations of SaaS just because either they haven't engaged their technology team early in the process, they haven't identified, the business process change that they're going to need to go through, because some of those products will come out of the box and may not be as configurable as they like,
Mm.
or just organizational change management, just understanding, how you're going to change the different jobs and the employees that you have, and what's going to change in their daily life, and how resistant to that change are they going to be.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of the companies who do so successfully, of course, are like yours, where you have an extremely competent leader who knows how to ask all those questions and figure out how to do all that assessment up front.
It's still a challenge though. It's,
It's sure, yeah,
but we've been
because
fortunate.
because one of the things that we do as part of our assessment process is figure out, because when we get called in, it's typically the client is often thinking, well, we're thinking about this CRM or versus this CRM or something versus something else or whatever it is. But what they haven't thought about is what are all the other components, that have to essentially integrate with that central. Let's just say if it's a CRM, that typically becomes the central component, unless the ERP is the
Right.
central
How is
component.
everything around that going to change
Yeah.
just by putting that
And
in?
well, not only change, but they haven't even thought about how it's going to connect at all. So what happens is if they did this, let's say they did this 3 years ago, what they end up with today when we walk in there is we call it a Franken system,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
where,
I've used that.
yeah, no, I think a lot of companies have, and of course what we're telling them that what we're looking for, of course, is technology bloat, which is where you have you know three different pieces of software that essentially do the same thing, or there's a lot of overlap, and you can probably get rid of one or two of them as part of the simplification
Right.
process and designing what it should look like when we're done or in the future, but if not that it's ever done, but you know what I mean. So yeah, and I guess and it probably comes down to the same thing as any of us doing anything for the first time. If we've never done it before, we don't know what questions to ask, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where I think organizations really benefit from bringing in, experienced consultants where, they can help them not only align, what are their strategic goals for initiatives like that, but, you know, what are the tactical things that they need to be thinking about, and especially the change management side. That's the biggest one for us, is just organizational change when you're
Yeah,
adopting new things. And we've seen a lot of technology rolled out, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years across these organizations, and it's a lot of change for a lot of different people. So
right. Mark, thank you so much. I'm gonna ask you one more favor, and that
sure.
is to share with us if you have any favorite resources, whether it's a book or a website, that if anyone is interested to sort of get a better understanding of the things that you consume as keep your sort of sword sharpened, what are the resources that you recommend typically?
I'm online quite a bit. I sort of traverse, lots of different topics. I mean, I do download a lot of Audible books that I look at. I can't remember the most recent one. I think it was the customer success story. But I think there's obviously lots of resources out there for people. I would just encourage people to interface with the partners that they have in their community, and certainly the channel partners that they have. But I think there's lots of different ways to get access to what's out there in the marketplace, and certainly look for events locally and sort of user groups that you can attend as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Mark, thanks again so much for being my guest today. I look forward to the opportunity of having you back for maybe a deeper dive at some point in the future.
All right. Thank you, Brennan.
Thank you for checking out this episode of RevOps Champions. This show is powered by Dynamico, a HubSpot consulting firm helping businesses level up the technology systems that power their ability to scale. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow RevOps Champions wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or visit RevOpsChampions.com to get immediate access to all of the latest episodes.